All right, everybody, welcome to DCPC Live presents Scene Support, the podcast that highlights the unsung heroes of the music scene. Recording engineers, show promoters, record labels, graphic artists, photographers, zine writers, sound people, and more. I'm your host, Scott Pash, owner and operator of DCPC Live, a DIY record label documenting live hardcore punk ska and metal shows on short-run vinyl. With over 30 years experience playing in hardcore bands across DC, Florida, and New York, as well as booking and promoting shows, I've had the privilege of working and meeting a lot of amazing people. Speaking of which, today's guest is Andy Scullin, creator, producer, and host of Unsigned 518, a podcast dedicated to spotlighting bands and musicians in the 5/8. I love how Andy has seemingly unscripted conversations with local musicians and bands, and his weekly feature, Unsigned 518's Weekend Spotlight, highlights upcoming shows in the area, interspersed with songs featured from bands. While not specifically a punk rock podcast, Andy features local artists ranging from stoner doom to blues to hardcore and punk. He's a dedicated fan and supporter of the scene, and after I moved to the Hudson Valley in 2023, his work was and continues to be an invaluable resource for understanding who's who in the Albany scene, and I am stoked to hear about his podcast and more. How you doing, Andy?
I'm good, man. Wow, what an introduction. Can we curse on this show?
Fuck yeah.
All right, good. What a fucking introduction, man. I'm like, wow. Yeah, no, it's good to be here. Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I'm not exactly sure when I first caught wind of your podcast. I would probably say it was within like 6 months or so of me being here. I did reviews for on my blog, on my website's blog, and I got something from some Albany bands. And of course, whenever I get something, I scour through their social media, see what's going on. And I'm sure one of them had you tagged on something. And I was like, this sounds like a dope ass way for me to find out what's going on. And I was just really enamored with the variety of what you do. And I'm like, oh, like, I can hear about everything that's happening in the Capital District from this dude, whether it's the stuff that like I'm intimately involved in, like punk rock, or also stuff like, that's not normally my cup of tea, but like I'm still fascinated at what's going on. So tell me about, like, I did your thing. Like, tell me about your podcast as if I had no idea what the fuck it is.
Okay. I mean, and in the introduction, you did say like, while not necessarily a punk rock show, like I'm like a punk rock dude.
Yep.
But like I'm really trying to expand my musical horizons. I don't want to just focus on one genre. I want to like have all genres on. It's my natural tendency to like drift back into the punk rock because like that's
I mean you're wearing a Misfits shirt right now, and like most of your logos you have like a Ramones shirt on, and so like you definitely have like that punk rock sensibility.
Yeah, and I mean, I go back, like, I mean, I'll be 52 in, a couple months.
49 in April, so I'm with you.
Nice. And I mean, I've been, like, Ramones were my favorite band in, like, 1986. So, like, I've been listening to that for, like, Descendants and NoFX and, like, all the classics is where I kind of started. But yeah, I've really, like, the show has, like, you said it kind of helped you discover it helps me discover what's going on. And like now at this point, I'm like between all my episodes, I'm on 230 episodes.
Okay. Wow. That's impressive.
And it'll be 3 years in May that I've been doing it. And I've basically missed maybe 3 weeks in those 3 years. Like purposely, like this year was like the first time that I like, very consciously made a decision to take a holiday break. And I was like, no content for 2 weeks. Like I'll be back in 2 weeks, no content. And that was the first time I'd done that. Other than that, it's...
And how do you maintain that schedule? Like how far in advance do you do it? Because that's one thing I've tried to do with this podcast is I have winter breaks. I'm getting my my PhD. And I've done about 10 or 11, interviews in the course of that break. And I'm doing mine bi-weekly because I want to be able to promote it. I also have like shows and records to promote, so I don't want to like burden my social media. But I'm like, I had to front load myself. Do you front load, or are you just like fucking on that dime every day?
I've done both, and I've found good and bad with both. And I think where I'm at now is kind of where I want to be. And now I'm about 2 episodes out.
Okay.
So, but for a while I was like you. I mean, I was literally, there'd be months where I'd record, every weekend, and I would sometimes record like 3 episodes on Saturday, 4 episodes on Sunday, then do the same thing the next week and the next week. And I had like all these episodes, but I found that I couldn't fucking hang on to them. Like
Sure.
I just couldn't do it. Like I was like package them and send them. So like there were some weeks that I'd release like, 2 or 3 episodes in a week, or be like, this is a special episode, package it, release it.
Uh,
Like, I was just like,
see,
I couldn't just sit on all that content.
but that's
Um,
also like you're your own producer too, right? So
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
you're not just the host, you're also the producer of it too. So you manage all of that as well.
I actually think of myself as a producer first. Like,
Okay.
that's what I used to do professionally was, I produce, but I would produce other people.
Okay.
I was never the talent. Like I did, it was at, corporate radio, so they don't need the plug, but I, did all the scheduling for the host, booked all his guests, like lined up the entire show and handed it to them so that they could host the show. And like, I was always in their ear, letting them know, hey, 30 seconds, we got to be out. Fucking wrap this up. And,
All right.
but it was never me.
So you made the jump from producer to being host, but you still consider, but you still consider yourself producer first, but you are clearly the host.
Yeah, yeah, and like it kind of works out like in a good way, because like one of the hardest parts about producing is, I guess, like anticipation of the host, like knowing kind of the rhythm of the host.
Sure.
And you don't want to cut out too much. You don't want to like make it sound weird and choppy. You don't want to leave things in that make them sound dumb. And what I do is I always, like, when I'm talking to a guest, I'm producing the show more than it. Like I'm watching the levels as I record, and I'm thinking, like, if I go through a show and no alarms went off in my head, then I'm basically like, that's almost done.
Done. Yeah.
Like, because anytime like somebody will say something that I'll be like, yeah, it's getting out of that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not leaving that in, or like, or if there was like, an awkward silence or whatever, like I'll like mentally mark it, you know what I mean? And then it makes it like a little easier, because going into the episode, I'm like, no red flags on this one. So like, there's not really anything to miss, like.
No, that makes sense. I share a Google Doc with Trev from Struggling Artist, who produces this for me. And like, I'll record it, and right off the bat, I'm like, okay, you need to cut that part out. I announced this person was paying Camp Punksylvania before it came out. So I need to take that out of there, yada, yada, yada. But I'm like, I have to go back and re-listen to it before I like can really give him the full notes of anything that I found to be problematic, and then put those notes in for him.
And I do, when I go back to produce the episode, I do listen to the whole thing. Like, I don't just go, oh yeah, this one was fine, whatever, package it and send it. I'll basically be like, all right, this one is fine. I basically can roll it and make sure there's no technical hiccups or whatever, and maybe tighten up some things, take out a few ums and uhs. I say like as if I were a 14-year-old in the 80s, like when like the Valley Girl talk.
Oh my God.
I say it all the time. Like, sometimes I'm listening to myself back, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, why are you talking like a teenager?
Riverside does a pretty good job of taking that shit out for me. It gets out of like weird words, like the pause phrases, the space fillers. The AI does a pretty decent job. I don't think I could listen to myself more than once. It's like, even being in a band, when I'm in the studio, once I've heard it, I don't want to go back and listen to it over and over again. I don't want to sit there while the guy's mixing and mastering it. I'm like, nope. My drums are good. I'll hear it at the end, and I'll say it's good, and I never want to listen to it ever again. I move on, and I am done.
Like, once the episode is wrapped up and scheduled and then goes live, I usually will listen to it one more time. But it's mostly because I have a fairly long commute in the morning.
Sure.
So like, I have enough time to listen to an entire episode. So on my ride in, I listen to it, and I also leave my house at 5:00 in the morning. So
you sound a lot like me.
No fucking rock and rollers are up. You know what I mean? So like, if there's a mistake in the episode, I can pull it there. So I usually listen to the episode twice at least after I record it.
So what inspired you to do this? Like, I love the idea of the Unsigned, that kind of goes to the whole, like, punk rock ethos, the underground band.
Right.
But like, you're doing it to your local region. You're keeping it very specific. Like, what made you decide to take the route you did and even start it to begin with?
Well, like 20 years ago, about 21 years ago, I was working at UEQX, which is an independent radio station out of Manchester, Vermont, but their main area is Albany. Like, so it's, I grew up in Vermont and live out here now. So like, I grew up with the station, and I worked there about 20 something years ago, and I hosted the local music show that's called, It's Still On. Shout out to Pearson, who hosts it now. EQ Exposure, it's called. Back in the day, like this is like literally like, 2003 is like 2004-ish, like cusp of like the internet age.
Sure. Like iTunes, like what do you call it? Not iTunes. Napster just got banned. Kazaa's still out there. Yeah, all that good stuff.
Hearing your song on the radio is a huge fucking deal. I mean, it is now.
I'd have lost my shit if I'd ever heard one of my songs on the radio.
Right. I mean, even now, like like I've heard my songs on the radio like a couple of times randomly, like out and about, and was just like. And like you want to tell people, and like, but like back then people would send in CDs. So I guess the thrill of hearing yourself on the radio was more the legwork it took to get somebody to listen to it. Because now it's an MP3 and an email. Yeah. And you're speaking from a radio dude. If I hosted a local music show and got all these emails, I would at least open and listen to every. It takes 2 seconds to open and be like. Yeah, I'll continue listening, or yeah, that sucks. But like sending in the CD, all you have to go on is this little piece of plastic, and sometimes it may have had that attitude of like, I'll get to it later. Sure. And I felt like that was something that I could control. Like I could bless these smaller bands, and this is in like 2003 or 4. Like I could bless these smaller bands with this higher stature, by basically doing nothing, just basically being like, hey, everybody else, listen to this song that I came to us. I think it's pretty cool, and people, were listening, and I had bands once it got rolling, I would have bands come into the studio and do like a MTV Unplugged style performance. If they were a rock band, we tried to strip it down as much as we could, but
like NPR's Tiny Desk.
Yeah, totally. And we would do a live song on it and an interview, and that was basically what I'm doing now. 17 years, 18 years passed or whatever, and I always had the idea in my head, and then I just I recently quit drinking.
Good.
When I first attempted by not drinking, I started in like a couple month bursts where I would say, hey, listen, for the next 3 months, not drinking at all. And then I'll reevaluate, the situation. So the first time I ever did that, I just like had all this energy and felt, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a fucking podcast.
All right.
And I had the idea. So what I did is I made a concept trailer. Just came into my studio here, my garage, but, the studio. Recorded like hey, this is my band had 2 songs that had been on the radio. Like, we were like, hey, trying to make a name. So I was like, hey, it's Andy. I'm shortwave radio band. Like, I'm going to start this podcast. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to feature, artists from the 518, like any genre, any whatever, and let's build a community. And by the end of the day, at 3 like media outlets around the area reaching out to me wanting to like put it on their shit. And
that's awesome.
I made a choice, and like it ended up like after a year. I mean, it's a whole another podcast, but it didn't work out, and I left there. And now I'm just like sort of mostly independent. I'm doing my own thing. Metroland. I don't know if you are familiar with.
Yeah, you're some sort of editor, like graphic editor or something on Metroland.
No,
I believe.
I'm the multimedia.
That's what I meant. Okay,
like I
graphic multimedia,
like socials, and I'm trying to get more podcasts up and running. But like that's something that we're we're building now. So it's I'm independent.
Got a
but
copy of it right here.
Fuck yeah.
I picked it up at the Eldorado the other day, and I was like, and I was looking through it, and I saw that you did a review of a hip hop band act, like Shitty Wizard or something like that. I'm like, oh, this reminds me of like, growing up in DC, there was a DC City paper, or Orlando, the Orlando City paper. Yours could be the Albany City paper, but it's Metroland. Like, this is pretty dope.
Yeah, it's what we're trying to do. Aaron Harks is like editor-in-chief, mastermind of the whole thing, but her and TJ Foster of the band Erie and myself about a year ago, or more than a year ago, a little more than a year ago, like started talking about this idea. And then Aaron, she's just like a fucking beast. She just makes shit happen that like literally had my
Force
head
of fucking
spinning.
nature sort of person.
Like it was like I still remember like getting the call where she's like, we're again, tossing around ideas, and I wouldn't hear from her for like a couple weeks, and it would like kind of make me like, am I like, off the team? What's happening?
Yeah.
Is like, did it go stagnant? And then like, I get the call. She's like, oh, yeah, sorry, I haven't talked to you in a while. I bought the name Metroland, and we're relaunching Metroland.
Wow.
And I was like, all right. And then it was like, we're just gonna do website. Maybe like sometime down the line we'll do print. And then she's like, we're doing a monthly print.
That's amazing.
And it's, we're on month, is it 4? Yeah, the 4th edition will be out next week. So it's the last Friday of every month. We do a print edition, and then we have and it's like what you're saying. It's a zine focused on the local acts.
And it goes just like it goes beyond music. There's art and poetry and theater.
Yes.
I got to tell you, I almost got to dance a dig when I saw Dan Savage in there. I was like, motherfucking Dan Savage is still doing that shit.
Too, so Metroland used to exist back in the day. It left, I think, in like 2012. It went down, and I remember like my wife and I talk about it, like, or we're talking about it up to this day. How we used to read it. When it would come out, we'd read it, and it was so great. And so again, with Aaron, I'm like, that'd be great if we got, if somehow we could get Dan Savage back. And she literally was like, did I not tell you? Like,
that's amazing.
She's like, I got him back. Like, yeah, she's a force of nature for sure. But yeah, so I just always wanted the show to be, and I tell people when they come on the show, like, think of this as your episode. Like, I don't want it to be an interview, like in the way that like this is a conversation. You know what I mean?
I have no questions prepared whatsoever. I'm just going with the flow.
Never prepare. And then that's why it's so funny. Like people are always like, how do you sound so natural? Do you just study all week on the gets? And I'm like, I don't do shit. I don't know how many, like sometimes I don't know how many members are in the band, what the band sounds like until like, an hour or two before they get there. When I'm getting the room ready, I'll put their music on and be like, oh, okay.
I did a little bit more than that, I admit.
You did. You 100. That's why, I don't know, if you watch the playback, you'll see me like going, well, goddamn, like this is like, it is research because I don't ever. But what I do is I just keep the framework the same, almost like an improv like template, I guess. I always have segment 1, segment 2, segment 3. It's like introduction and then a song and then second part of the conversation, a song, and then the wrap up and then done. It usually is about 35 minutes, but I mean, I've had 90-minute episodes and I've had like 17-minute episodes.
Sure. I mean, I've been doing this a while and I'm not exactly a shy person. So, I've taught middle school and, being in a band for years, I'm pretty sociable enough. But every now and then you're like, okay, I think that's the extent of this conversation. And I could talk more, but I really think that we've, it all depends on the interaction and the chemistry that you have with the person on there, I feel like. So if it's not coming across naturally, then there's no reason to keep it going and try and like force something out of it.
Yeah, and it's tough because like sometimes like I'm like you where I'm like I have no problem talking. Like, I will talk. Like I'm not like a shy person, like especially when it comes to talk. My first radio job, I was 18 years old, and 1991, and I was on air at a smooth jazz station.
Nice, and Kenny G.
I was like, like for real, like instrumental stuff, like full on like, and I was like a 18-year-old. I looked like Anthony Kiedis from the Chili Peppers. I had like really
Fucking great.
long hair. It was like flannels and Doc Martens, and I was like stoner kid. But when I got on the air, I was so smooth, and people thought that they were talking to like,
Yeah, I
and I was
love that. Well
and I
done.
was just
He's
like a
like,
punk
he was like,
ass kid.
I have that smooth jazz voice.
And I'd go to like live events sometimes, like with the crew, and they'd be like, "Yeah, which one's Andy?" And I'm like, "It's me." And they'd be like,
And they're like, what the fuck?
"Cause
That's
like our average
hilarious.
listener was like 40, and I
Yeah,
was like 18, 19, one kid." But
that's so rad. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's like, I don't know if you've ever had a guest host, but I've like had one, and I tried to do that with a previous podcast, and I find it's hard because I'm so used to kind of like running the room from being a teacher for years that I think it's hard for someone else to develop with me a touch and flow, and it's hard for me to slow down and not
right.
like jump to my next thought. So
I think it would be impossible for me to have a co-host like the one-on-one, and like I even sometimes tell bands like if there's like 5 or 6 member bands, I'm like, if you can, like if not everybody's like big talkers, like they don't even have to come, like
yeah,
the less
pare it
people that
down.
come, the better, because
Yep.
it gets confusing. But the one-on-one for me is like my favorite, when it's just like, no, just I'm a solo art, and I'm like, sweet. Like, I love it.
Yes.
It
So
just makes it easy. Yeah.
I have so many ideas and questions. So Girth Control, they do your intro for the weekend spotlight.
Yeah.
And they mention your name, but your name is also mentioned in the regular intro. So like you literally had two bands write songs to intro your podcast that
I
talk about how
actually,
awesome you are. Am I incorrect in this, or is that accurate?
I actually have three. There's a Halloween one that's in my Halloween episodes, that actually the member of my band, the singer of my band, and the guitar player from a band called Gozer, who are like a doom stoner
Doom
metal
metal.
band, they collaborated and gifted me a version it sounds like it's basically a ripoff of the Monster Mash, but
Yes.
it does call me out by name. It calls me motherfucking Andy right out of the gate. Yeah, so I have three. I have three theme songs about how awesome I
You have
am.
three theme songs. Most people don't walk around with even one theme song, even if they're like in the WWE. And you have three motherfucking theme songs.
Sometimes you just like. Well, the first one was Simple Machine, and that's
Yes.
Dave Tayo and John Durden, who collaborate on that. They're a studio band. They don't play out live because they play like there's like 70 instruments in each
Sure.
thing, and like they're both brilliant musicians. But Dave produced a bunch of my band stuff, and we've been friends for a decade and a half and go way back. But that first one he gave me, and it was I can't remember what it was for. It was a thank you for something. It was a couple years ago, but like to thank me, just like one day he like sent me this sent me this thing. It was like, yeah, I wrote you a jingle. Like,
That's
what the fuck?
amazing.
And then my bandmate wrote me another one, and then Mikey from the band The Sugar Hole actually suggested
Yes.
Girth Control on one of my episodes. Like you should ask Girth Control, because they're like one of my favorite bands. Like
And they're very fun. So
I
fun.
love them. They're so great. And he was like, you should just ask them if they would do one. And on the episode, I was like, all right, I'm calling you guys out. And then I messaged them separately. I'm like, what, would you? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And then again, I didn't think about it for, I don't know, I think it was like 6 weeks or whatever. And all of a sudden I get an email. Oh yeah, here's your new
That's
theme
awesome.
song.
That's so fucking great, dude. That is
Yeah,
awesome, dude.
right.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes you just ask and people
yeah,
will do cool shit.
you never know what someone's going to say. That's kind of always been my thing, even from when I was like in high school.
Yeah,
Like I would
mine too.
ask. I
100%.
I was never afraid to ask the crazy question. That's how I like booked shows out of state as like 16 and 17-year-old. That's how I'd get big bands to come.
That's how
You
we got
don't
in the
know
radio.
until you ask. I was like, what's the
Yeah.
worst you're going to fucking say? They're going to say no or not respond.
Yeah.
Whatever. Let's move
Yeah.
on.
I give that as advice all the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
just ask.
Yeah.
Shit. Like, they're like, how do you, just ask. You just
Yeah.
simply fucking ask. And
It's
that's how you get your done.
Yeah, it's super valid. So you mentioned Gozer, super great doom metal. I think they're on your last weekend hotlight, right?
Maybe. Yeah, probably. Yes. I
One
think
of
they
them
are.
recently. So not only did you have them, but
They're
you had
buddies of
something
mine.
called like Bad Records or Bad Choice or Bad
Yeah.
Sound or
So I went up, and like this is another thing that's like really cool that just like happened from the podcast is there's this guy Russ Robson who's a musician out of Ontario, Canada, and he had started this music festival. Basically, he started it in his backyard, and it was called Gussapalooza.
okay.
And it's, it started basically with like a band and a bonfire, and now it's like this like 2-stage festival. It's like a 3-day thing. It was tons of vendors, and like it was fucking badass. But anyway, he was down in Mexico and had come across my podcast and just sent me a message and was like, "Hey, I do this thing called Gussapalooza that's all unsigned artists. It's like
Yeah.
it's like kind of bigger. Unsigned is a loose word. Like, they're not like these huge national acts.
Yeah.
You know, smaller bands, I guess you could say. But he invited me up. He was like, if you want to come up, come up and set up a booth and get some interviews and whatever. So I was like, all right. It was a 9-hour drive. Just blasted it in one shot. Like,
There you go.
went up
Do
there
it.
by myself. Got an Airbnb like a couple miles away from the grounds, and because that's the thing. Like, not partying, like not drinking
Yeah.
means that like, when it's like 11 o'clock at night, I'm like,
Peace out. Yep.
I'm not like,
I understand.
let's fucking go until 4 a.m. Like
Yeah.
that. Maybe a year ago I would have been, but
Yeah,
no,
I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
I get that. I do Camp Pennsylvania as a vendor, and I never make it to their after hours shows.
And
I'm
like
like,
it
nope.
sounds rad.
I'm driving 30 minutes to my mom's house, who lives nearby in Pennsylvania, and I'm done. It's
Yeah,
11 o'clock or almost midnight, and I'm like, I've been here since 10 a.m. I'm done.
yeah,
I'm
that's the
almost
thing.
50 years old, and I have done the 12-hour day. I'm done.
Right. And I was there by myself, like set
Yeah,
up, tear down by myself. But
yeah,
anyway, there was these other vendors like that had booths or whatever. And there was these dudes, they're called Bad Club Media is like
yes,
and then they do a podcast called Bad Music Club. And it's Jake and Mike and Matt, their producer. And I just like became super close buddies with him almost immediately, and ended up hanging out the whole weekend. And I just really like the dudes, and they're doing basically the same thing that I'm doing, but they're doing it up in Ontario. And before the weekend was even over, we were like, let's collaborate on something. Like,
yeah,
let's do something. And then we just came up with the idea, since they do these quick band spotlights. I was like, what if I just like aped your style on that, but sent you my recommendation? And they have like the little Wolfman and vampire animated things.
yeah,
They made the animated thing for me. And so I send them a band from around here that's on my radar, and they send me
yeah.
one of theirs.
Because
And
the one I was listening to was like something called Alley Beers.
yeah, those guys are fucking
I was
rad.
like, what's Winona Ryder? And I was like, oh, this is good.
No, it was
I was
Shania
like,
Twain. It was Shania Twain.
Shania Twain.
They
That's who it
did
was.
it all.
Shania
They
Twain.
did it all. And that song is called Twain Wreck.
I was like,
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
yeah,
and like they are like a more of a punk rock show. Like
yeah,
they're I mean great dudes, and I'm gonna go again this year. Like I don't know, you should maybe I'll put you in touch with them, see if you want to
yeah,
pop up. But there was so many cool acts. I got to interview like any band that was there, and like Russ, the the guy organizing the entire thing. This was a legit festival, and he's like, if you want to go backstage, hang out, like go backstage.
nice.
Like, and it was basically, I'm like, keep the hat on. It's like a
Which, by the
beaver.
way, for those of you not watching this, I love like, you stick with that orange like really well. You do a really nice job of maintaining your orange theme.
Yeah, I
So
work in
I appreciate
marketing,
that.
so like it's all about the branding. And like I don't normally wear this hat. Like I literally threw this hat on like 2 seconds before I hopped on this with you, and like I will take it off like when I'm done. Is that a Descendants tattoo on your arm?
Yeah, so I have the Descendants, I Want All, and then I have All Roy for President. I used to be a social studies teacher, so
All right,
you know,
Descendants are like my all-time favorite band.
yeah, absolutely fabulous band.
But anyway, the hat is rule number one is you got to be on brand. And there's this, I don't know if you know who Matt Bacon is. He's the social media guy, cigar and long hair.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, look it up. He does does like advice for band. You know, that's like what he does professionally. Like he's basically DM for consultation or whatever. But he gives a lot of great advice. And he was at Gusapalooza, and like one of his pieces of advice is basically like it's got to be the consistency. And he was like, "Why do you think in every fucking video I have a cigar, even if it's not lit? He has a cigar and long hair."
Sure,
like, that's
I've worn this beanie on every podcast so far.
Yeah.
So, it's got my logo on it. I might switch to my baseball cap when it's no longer fucking cold. But it's going to have the logo on it still. And
I leaned into it a little hard with my logo, like the little Breaking Bad ripoff. I don't know if you've seen it.
I did. That's great, though.
Yeah, it's the orange hat and the glass. And a lot of people don't get that it's like, it's Breaking Bad.
Absolutely.
And like, oh, yeah, okay. And I'm like, what do you fucking mean, okay?
What do you mean, okay, man? You don't get it.
It's exactly like it, except no goatee,
I think up until like this point, almost every shirt I've worn has been a band on my label. So I'm wearing Cinnamon today, which is an Albany hardcore band, which I thought was, fine for where you're at. And maybe one day they will put out a live record by them, which constitutes being on my label, because that's all I do is like a one-shot deal. So I'm not like a real record label that like has contracts and shit like that.
Right.
You mentioned Paloozas. You have an AndyPalooza, don't you?
I do. It's May 17th at SingleCut in Clifton Park. And SingleCut is a brewery. I believe they started down in Brooklyn.
Okay.
This is SingleCut North up here in Clifton Park. But they're like a super cool brewery, very music centric. They spin vinyl as their house music. Like that's, their only house music is vinyl. And like they do like vinyl specials. And they've been ramping up their live music area and stuff. Like my band's played there a bunch of times, and they're always like, they treat you like you're a fucking rock star. And I say that every time. I'm like, yeah, it's so crazy how good this place treats us. So one year, my buddies were doing a show, the Sugar Holds, and then the band Baton Killers, Upstate's premier Killers tribute band. We're putting together a show, and it just happened to be on my birthday. And they asked us to play, and I was like, yeah, that's my 50th birthday. It's like that day. And then they were like, we're turning it into a birthday party.
There you go.
We called it AndyPalooza, and it was fucking huge. It was like way bigger than we expected. And then kind of the same thing next year. We're like, hey, we're doing this again. And they were like, let's do it again. And this will be year 3.
All right.
And other than my band, every year is 3 completely different other bands.
Okay.
Like that's a hard rule. Like no repeats.
And it is of any like broad genre, because I said you're
no genre. And this year we're like a alternative punk ska sounding rock band. And then we have Ab the Autocrat, who's a DJ. He does all the music on the Weekend Spotlight. You'll hear that.
Rad.
And then 2 MCs are going to be with him, Mr. Pigs and Exquisite. They've both been featured on my show. You can go check them out. So it'll be a punk band, hip-hop show, and then a Gozer is playing. So then it'll be a stoner doom metal. And then Brother Junction, who are like funk rock.
I love that.
So it's all, meant to make you move, like all party stuff, but multi-genre.
I like the variety. Like I tend to think of myself as doing multi-genre, but it's still within like my punk adjacent world. Like I do have like pop punk, ska, beat down hardcore, and like skate punk all in the same show. But like I've gone to enough shows where it's all beat down hardcore or all ska that I still feel like I'm doing more of a variety than a lot of people.
Yeah. And like I've always said, like, and I've said it on my show a bunch of times, like I love the multi-genre. Yeah. Like the multi-genre show. And like I would love like shows that start with like a solo acoustic folk artist that goes into like, a duo, into a hip-hop thing, into a whatever, builds up.
I'm going to push back on that. The solo acoustic folk artist doesn't have to open the set. I have a couple folk bands on my like roster, and they can play middle of the set. They can even end out the set. It's a nice, like, easygoing way to end the night as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because
Yeah,
it happens. I have a couple
always go with,
artists, and they're always like,
velocity.
we always have to open.
Yeah, I mean, I do tend to, like, when I think of the bill, I usually think of it in terms of velocity and you know, getting that momentum and keeping it going up, and like, yeah.
But every now and then you can have the right band that knows how to, like, be acoustic and be solo, but calls people to, like, sing along and be engaged. So even though it doesn't have, like, pounding drums and distortion and it's not rapid fire, they know how to make it work. So I encourage you to ponder that in the future.
Well.
Doesn't always work, but it can work.
And I don't usually, like, this is basically the only show that I put together. Like, most of the times I'm just a passive member of a band, you know what I mean? I'm just a bass player and occasional singer in the band. Like, but for this one, I got to pick the lineup, and
that's super
we're gonna
rad,
try
dude.
to get,
Good
like,
for you,
vendors in there. I think we're gonna have a tattoo artist there.
Okay.
Doing, like, quick no appointment tattoos.
Well, I mean, I might be more than open to being a vendor if you're looking for vendors.
Yeah.
I have a show the following day in Kingston that I'm running, but that's a Saturday, so I should be. I'm out of school even by that point, so I should be good to go.
Like, the other thing about it is that, you know, I'm in the twilight years, so I'm not fucking partying until midnight anymore, even no matter what. So, like, AndyPaloozas are usually wrapped up by like 9 o'clock at the latest.
Dude, that's like my Sunday shows. I was calling them Sunday matinees, but somebody on Facebook called me out and said a matinee starts at 2. And since my show started at 4, they're just an evening with. And I was like, I guess. I'm sorry. Like, I'm so used to shows starting at 10 o'clock that I thought a show starting at 4 could be considered a matinee.
Yeah,
but, like,
that's when we're starting. We're starting at 4.
ChatGPT agreed with him, so I was like, fine.
Oh, wow.
Be that way.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. Anything after 4 is not a matinee. And I was like,
I'm agreeing with you, though. We started, AndyPalooza 3 starts at 4, and I'm like, it's a matinee. Like, the whole draw. We'll get you home.
Nope.
We'll get you home.
No, I literally had a guy, because I'm doing a matinee in Poughkeepsie. He's like, finally, you're doing a real matinee. And I'm like, and I get it. And I also don't get it. Like, I tend to get pretty annoyed when people try and call me out on social media. You know, I come from a world of, like, community building in the punk rock. I was like, if you got something to say, you need to send me a direct message.
Right.
Like, the whole, like, publicly, how dare you do this?
Don't see the fucking world.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10, that guy wasn't terribly snarky about it. But, like, when it happens, I send a direct message to the person, and I open up with, like, in the future, I think it'd be better for building our community if we, like, actually have a conversation about it instead of you just leaving a snarky comment, because you're just trying to tear me down instead of build us up together.
Yeah.
So, like,
and that doesn't open it up to vitriol, you know?
Yeah. I just, you know, it's kind of like how you and I even started speaking, right? Like, I had posted the post after Trump's election where I was like, hey, if anyone needs something out there, like, you know, I believe in being there for people, not about, like, tearing people down. Yeah, even if some people don't do the things the way I would do them, doesn't mean they're bad. They're just doing things their own way.
Grabbing a weed soda.
Yeah, no problem. You know, it's kind of like, even like, you know, I may be mostly into punk rock, but I appreciate, you know, what you're doing, because it does focus on people who are musicians, who are doing their best. And even if I don't always lean towards that style of music, I respect the fact that they're getting out there and doing their shit. And I respect you for covering it.
And, like, my thing is, like, I found that the friendships just transcend the music anyway. Like, I've made so many friends, and, like, you know, friends that are, like, in fucking super thrash death metal bands, and, like, the folkiest of folk artists, and I don't, like, you know, I don't think of them as, like, oh, like, my folk friends or my metal friend, you know?
Sure.
Like, I made so many friends, and it's not just me. Like, bands, you know, I've been to folk shows and seen, you know, members of metal bands. Yeah. They're supporting their friend in the folk band.
One of my favorite singers turned, like, hardcore singer turned singer-songwriter, Tim Berry from Avail, he'll always tell you, he's like, yeah, I play these shows now, and most of my people that come out there don't even know what Avail is. Like, they've never even heard of it. And then they'll find out I'm in the band, they'll check it. I was like, oh, that's some loud, screamy shit. And he's like, and then I got Avail fans that say I'm too, like, a band jamboree for them. He's like, it's fine. You know, I was like, I love them both.
My dog was not so subtly letting me know he needed me to go open the back door for him.
No problem at all, dude.
Like,
no
I'm sitting there talking.
We're getting a tour of your house. I like it.
Yeah. My hallway. And this is my Pac-Man machine.
Fuck yeah.
Got some
Classic.
plums.
So if a band wanted to be featured, do you have people emailing you, or are you on the constant trial for it, or how do you manage who your guests are?
It definitely started with me reaching out a lot.
Yeah.
Where I would just be on the constant trial, constantly reaching out to people, being like, "Hey, I'd like you on the show, like you on the show." And now, like, it's really gotten to the point where, for the most part, I don't have to do much outreach. Like,
Okay.
people are reaching out to me, and I have gotten like to the point. Like, the first year was really bad as far as me abusing myself and not respecting my own time. Like,
Sure. I get that.
the second year was bad, but getting a little better. This year is better, where I'm now. I record on Sundays, and my like resolution for this year is basically I'm recording one episode per Sunday.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
Like one episode per Sunday. So if you want to be on the show,
Yep.
I have this Sunday, or this. I have whatever. But if someone takes that Sunday, then that Sunday's off the book.
That Sunday's gone.
Before, I would literally just, when can you? And I would bend over backwards to accommodate, and it didn't work for me. Yeah.
I get that. I'm personally refusing to do weekends if I can help it. I have I have my own life. I have 2 kids. I have a wife, and I'm like, my weekends are. I never know when something's happening, and I don't want to tell my kid that I can't take them to go roller skating with their friend because I have a podcast at 3:00.
Yeah, I don't have kids, but yeah, definitely. I'm just a fucking kid myself.
Whereas I tend to know by the time I get home at 4:30, my kid wants to go and like sit in a room and listen to music and not be bothered by me. So I'm going to be okay for a couple hours.
Dad,
like they're teenagers. They're done with me by that point. The talk on the car ride home is all they need.
Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I got
a couple
nothing.
of the members of my band, I'll have or three of the 5 of us have teenagers. So, and it's so funny because like, you think you're like, you have a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old. They've got to think you're like super cool for playing in a band, right?
There's something not cool. My 16-year-old is away at Simon's Rock at Bard College. It's like a pre-college program. Got a scholarship. She works too damn hard. I told her to relax and have some fun. She came back from winter break, and since she's still in high school, they come back from break sooner than the college kids because of like the state regulations. So they take a junior term, like where they take like basically just electives for the next 2.5 weeks. So she had choices of electives: cooking, ceramic tiling, and punk rock history. You know which class she didn't fucking take?
No.
Punk rock history.
Like, I'll make something out of ceramic or whatever.
She's like, I went with you, Dad. I've heard it. I've worked your shows. I put your records together.
Go to, like, school everybody else.
Yeah. Well, that's her other thing. It's just like, you're a history teacher. I've already dealt with the fact of you telling me how many times people got things wrong. And I don't need you telling me to tell them that the Talking Heads aren't a punk band just because they played CBGBs with the Ramones.
CBGBs alone, what is it? Country, bluegrass, and blues?
Yeah, like for like distinguishing gourmands or something like that, or
isn't it country bluegrass?
Country bluegrass blues and other music for something gourmands. Because OMFUG, the unassuming.
What's funny is
uncorrupted
Ungano's Club. Like that, like punk club back. I think it was called Ungano's. But
was that in this area?
It was in New York City.
Oh.
But it was back in like the same punk rock heyday. But like I grew up with like that guy moved to my small town and I grew up with his kids and shit. And I had no idea until literally like 2 years ago. I was listening to No Dogs in Space, which is Marcus Parks from Last Podcast on the Left. Music, mostly punk rock stuff, but does a deep dive on some shit. And they were talking about this club, Ungano's. And I'm like, I went to school with some Ungano's. And I fucking looked it up. And it was the same. I'm like, that dude's dad owned the fucking punk rock clubs like down in New York, and I had no idea.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and I was listening to punk rock at the time. I'm like,
nope,
hanging out at punk rock royalty's house with no fucking idea.
I keep thinking one day my kids will like be impressed by the record label, by the band, by anything that I do, and it's okay.
Secretly, maybe they are. Secretly,
whatever. One day when they're older, like I'm gonna actually leave something behind for them to remember me by. Where what am I gonna get from my parents? Some old clothes and empty beer cans. I'm just saying. So, do you monetize it all? And if you don't want to talk about that, we can cut that part out. Like, do
I
you
don't.
do Patreon or subscribing or anything like
I mean,
that? Sponsors?
I have a thing like it's called Buy Me a Coffee,
I saw that.
and it's basically it's like a one time payment. If somebody wants like a quote unquote coffee is $5, and like they can send me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But to be honest, like I mean, I've had that Buy Me a Coffee thing up for like fucking 2 years, and I've had maybe like 15 coffees bought
Yep.
for me, and not in the last, certainly not in the last year, not a single one in the last
Yeah.
year. So no,
Maybe
I
on.
don't monetize. Even pay, like the subscription fees. Like I was paying that up until very recently. Got that taken care of. So
Yeah.
I don't pay to do the show anymore. But I
Yeah. Because
definitely
like
don't
right
get paid.
now, I'm paying because I have a producer, so I have to pay
Yeah,
him,
yeah.
and
I
I'm
mean,
paying for
literally up
obviously like
until
using Riverside. So
not long
you know,
ago.
to be fair to me though, like I at least look at it as my record label's in the title, and I talk about it here and there. And so to me, it's like a long form of advertising, and not to be like social capitalistic about it, but like I'm making a social network and meeting people that could help me expand the network of myself and my artists in the
It's all about
future.
me.
So, but yeah, I'm like, it doesn't, it's, there is a benefit to me despite the lack of cost besides just talking to rad people.
Right. Me
I
too. I
admit
mean,
that.
me too for sure. Like the way my show is set up, and like, and it's not an accident, is that it grows every week.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's slow, but my shows grow. It grows every week because every week I have a guest on the show, a band on the show, and when that episode is done and packaged and available, they want their fans and friends and family in their circle to
To
hear
hear it.
them,
Yep.
to hear their story and hear their songs on the podcast that can be heard anywhere in the world. And like, so every episode that comes out, like almost kind of like has its own street team, I guess. Like,
Sure. No, that makes sense. Are you able to track through your analytics, like who's the person that's been there, like sticks through every episode? Like I can tell you, I have like about a half dozen people going back 4 years that have bought every record I've ever put out. Every record, which I think is insane because I've done 35 in the last 4 years. It's a lot of friggin' money they're spending. So can you track who's like been paying attention, is like basically is there for you throughout?
I don't have like, cause I have like a basic subscription on my like distribution thing, but I think I can't because I don't see actual people. I just see like the demographics, like I see age
Sure.
and location
Okay.
essentially. So like I kind of know, like, hey, this one city has this many listens every week. So like
Yep.
it's the same couple people, but I don't know who,
It's been a hot minute. When I was in a band in Florida, I managed all the analytics for the band. I could check the Spotify and say not only how many listeners I had each month, but how many were continual listeners. It did a breakdown, so I knew if they were consistent people versus like jumper inners and jumper outers. I believe it's been a long time. The last band I was in charge of nothing. I was a drummer. I showed up, I hit shit, I left. I didn't book shows, I didn't do promotion, I didn't do merchandise. I just came in and did my job.
I'm like the point guy in my band, and like I've kind of been like a lot of it's a double edged sword because a lot of people
Yeah.
call me like say that I'm the front man, and I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
I fucking play bass, like and like I sing a couple songs, like I do sing a couple
Yep.
songs, but I sing a couple songs, like not enough to
Sure.
be the front man, like Lonnie, he's like our lead guitarist and he sings the lion's share of songs, but like out of the 5 members, 4 members sing songs.
See,
So like I'm not the
it's
front,
it's
like so I've
it's
been
the guy
trying to
you talk to though, right? It's the person you speak to most often. And like I've
right.
gotten to the point I've booked so many shows over 30 years and I've done the records. Like I start to just assume like this is the person in the band that I know. Who's like, oh, do you know that band? They're great guys. I'm like, I'll be honest, I only really know XY person. The other people in the band I've barely spoken to because it's whoever does it. Like what drives me crazy is on social media. If there's a band that like shares it with everyone and then everyone responds and you never know which person you're speaking to.
Right, right.
Like,
Yeah, we definitely do the point person. Like
yeah.
I talk to the promoter, the person at the venue, and then I bring questions to the band, and you know what I mean, like. Because yeah, I've seen that happen too, where like you don't even know who you're talking to, and it's like
You're
well, you
talking to and it
responded
gets
in
all
the group
mixed up.
message. That wasn't me in the group message. That was probably so and so. Like yeah,
Yeah, no, you got to have one person on point. I was like, you know, even if the other people are reading it, they've got to mark it as unread or save or
right.
something like that. Like
Yeah,
they've got to
I'm the
allow
point
one
person,
person.
but definitely not the front man when it comes to performance. Like
Yeah, but people get that confused often, right? They just assume, oh, you're the guy that talks, so you must be the front person. It's like, no, you're a bass player. I'm just a drummer.
yeah, I'm like no for most of the songs, I'm just playing bass and singing some backup,
Yep.
and
I'm not Phil Collins. I'm not Mike Hurge. I am not the guy in charge of like.
but and
I'm not
that's
the
how
front
I
person.
like it. I'm trying to like. You know, because the other people in the band are super fucking talented, and I want
Yeah,
the focus to be on that.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really enjoyed hearing about how you started the podcast, how you do it, and just talking to you some more. Like, you know, I could just tell from the couple of communications we did over social media that you're just an upstanding dude. And I'm
Right.
glad that our face to face like continues to uphold that. And I really appreciate you giving me the time to ask you some questions and hear about all the dope shit you're doing, dude.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate being asked to come on. It's still surprising anytime that someone's like, "Yeah, I want you to come on and talk." I'm like, "Oh, me? All right."
Yeah, absolutely you. And we're gonna close out with a song. I always have the what do you call it, the guest pick a song. You want to pick one of your songs from your band? Maybe you want to send me the MP3 and an image, and we'll close it out with that song.
Yeah. When is this gonna air?
Oh, not for a couple months.
Couple months?
Yeah.
Then yeah. Because we just recorded an album. Like,
Okay.
we just wrapped up recording last weekend, and it's in the mixing and mastering stage, and we have a single that we're hoping to have come out next month, like in February.
Yeah, go ahead and
I'll
send me
say,
that when it's ready. Because
yeah,
I'm doing every other week, and you're probably episode somewhere between 10 and 12. So
fuck
it's
yeah.
gonna be a hot
So
minute.
it'll definitely be out. So I'll say it with
Yeah.
confidence. This
With
is
confidence.
Crash
You hear that?
Site is the name of this one.
So stick around after we say goodbye and listen to Crash Site from name of the band again.
Shortwave radio band.
Shortwave Radio Band, which I knew, but you didn't come out here to talk about your bands because we don't talk about bands on this podcast. Well, thank you everyone at home for listening, watching, whatever it is. Thank you for following. Thank you for sharing. And thank you again, Andy. Much love to everyone in PMA around the world.